Welcome to This Week, a weekly news review program. I'm your host, Otgonbayar. Today we'll talk about coronavirus status and vaccination progress in Mongolia, what happened in politics, economic situation, and other news. 436 new cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed from 8th to 12th of March, and 368 people have recovered and were transferred to home isolation. 74,000 were tested during that period, and as of Friday, the total number of cases is now 3,664, of whom 77% have fully recovered. The situation in the capital became very difficult since the strict lockdown, and infection has increased significantly in recent days. There are 81 registered clusters. Of these, 21 have been inactive for past few months. There are currently 41 active clusters, and the National Drama Theatre-related cluster involves many people, and 450 close contacts have been registered. After 14 days, there is a 50% chance of 150 to 400 infections a day, said the Deputy Prime Minister. There have been reported 8 fatalities overall, and 4 of them were reported to be complications from different health problems. As of March 12, 52,057 people had been vaccinated over the last 7 days. The vaccination progress has become more active over 2 days, with 20,000 people being vaccinated per day. 93 teams of 672 doctors and staff worked at 44 immunization points, and it was planned to vaccinate 15,000 people, including employees of public and private enterprises and organizations that need to continue their operation. The government of Mongolia aims to immunize 2 million people over the age of 18, and more than 1 million people are expected to be vaccinated at the end of May. Since the start of vaccination on February 23rd, a total of 67,494 at-risk and target groups have been vaccinated. The Japanese government has agreed to provide Mongolia with significant financial support to achieve the goal of immunizing 60% of the population against COVID-19. Humanitarian aid of $21.5 million through UNICEF will be granted for 2 health sector capacity building projects to support universal immunization against COVID-19. The project will finance the purchase of 2.7 million doses of vaccines and necessary immunization equipment sufficient to immunize 50% of Mongolia's population against COVID-19 and to provide information and advertising about immunization. In addition, the Japanese government is one of the main sponsors of the COVAX program, which will provide sufficient vaccines for 20% of Mongolia's population. First of all, the vaccine will be given to vulnerable groups such as medical personnel, the elderly, and people with chronic diseases. Japan's support is essential for the sustainability of immunization programs in Mongolia. Over 2.7 million new cases were reported last week, a 2% increase compared to the previous week globally. The global case increase was driven by increases in the Eastern Mediterranean by 10%, African region also by 10%, and Europe by 4%, while small declines were seen in the Americas by -2%, Southeast Asia also by -2%, and Western Pacific region by -6%. Globally, around half of countries are seeing declines, while the other half are experiencing increasing numbers of new cases. Global new deaths continue to downward trend observed since early February 2021, declining a further 6% compared to last week. Death rates declined in all regions except in the Eastern Mediterranean, where new deaths reported rose by 9%. The Americas and Europe account for around 80% of new cases and new deaths reported globally. The President of Mongolia, Batolga Haltma, delivered a document to the Speaker of Parliament, Zandan Shatar, to discuss the dismissal of the Ambassador of Mongolia to the United States, Otgonbayar, on Wednesday. President Batolga handed a letter of credence to the Ambassador Otgonbayar on March 23, 2018. In that letter was the direction to continue the ongoing dialogue on tax exemptions for Mongolian textile products entering the U.S. market and on combating corruption. According to the President's office, the President made this decision based on the review of the unsatisfactory performance on the above-mentioned tasks. In addition, the ambassador posted on social media regarding the ongoing dispute of the courts of New York of the possible transactions of profits from Mongolia's resources into particular politicians' offshore accounts, when a final court decision hasn't yet been made. that was a breach of legal duties of a diplomatic official and ethics of a public servant, according to the statement. Temporary and long-term residents affected by the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown can make arrangements to return to their home country. However, requirements may vary depending on their nationality. Notably, Russian nationals who wish to leave Mongolia can cross the border at the Otgonbayar port of the entry. Those departing through Boyuntukhai International Airport should contact the relevant air carriers for further information. Chinese nationals who wish to depart Mongolia must file a request at the Chinese embassy and follow their embassy's instructions. For other nationals, they may book a charter flight and the airline company shall provide them with the relevant information. A job support loan with an interest rate of 3% based on bank sources will be provided to businesses starting this week. The government will provide interest rate support to loan takers and pay the difference to the banking institutions. The Bank of Mongolia will act as the government's financial intermediary in issuing guarantees from the Loan Guarantee Fund in accordance with the relevant laws, providing interest rate support. Low-interest job support loans are subject to the following conditions. A total loan amount of up to 2 trillion MNT will be provided for the financing of the job support loan scheme. Loan amounts can vary. For example, business entities can get up to 500 million MNT, while an individual or entrepreneur can get up to 50 million MNT. The main purpose of this loan is to create the working capital necessary for the borrowing entities to keep their jobs and to sustain their business. The loan will be provided for a term of up to 3 years. The cabinet held its regularly weekly meeting on Friday. During the meeting, the Minister of Finance, Jiaoheng, introduced actions to be carried out on advancing the ownership types, duties, structures and organizations of state-owned and partially state-owned companies. Within the first 100 days of this new government, the cabinet made clear that it aims to finalize the issues regarding the state-owned companies that have worked for years with poor performances and have suffered financial losses. As of 2019, 107 state-owned and 339 locally owned companies functioned with a loss of 37 trillion MNT and a profit of 1.5 trillion MNT. For instance, Erdenet Mining Corporation generated a profit of 1.1 trillion MNT and Erdenet Town Talgog generated 440 billion MNT, and the rest of the companies were non-profitable. Further, the cabinet discussed the activities to be carried out in the near future. Notably, to publicly announce the companies of strategic importance and to continue their operations under 100% state ownership, to stop or merge unprofitable companies and those companies with operations that can be run by private entities, to sell up to 34% of companies' IPOs to the public in order to activate public monitoring and good governance, to fully operate financial transparency. In addition, the cabinet decided to build fully and semi-automated potato and vegetable warehouses with a total capacity of 8,500 tons in Siedling, Hovd, Hinti, Umngo and Goalta provinces with a soft loan from Poland. Currently, there are more than 10,000 cellars and warehouses with a capacity of more than 220,000 tons registered nationwide. Mongolian Sustainable Kashmir Platform first plenary meeting was held virtually on March 11th. The meeting was launched by MSCP stakeholders and United Nations Development Programme's resident representatives' opening speech. The platform's objective are to ensure a strong and coherent legal and institutional framework for the sustainability of Kashmir production in Mongolia. It endeavors to establish partnerships and coordinated investments and actions that accelerate current efforts to advance the sustainability of production and processing in Mongolia, so that it will enable Mongolia to be a global leader for sustainable Kashmir production. The plenary meeting continued with panel discussions and presentations on sustainable Kashmir, comparative analysis of Kashmir initiatives, introducing on the upcoming 2021 activities of the Mongolian Sustainable Kashmir Platform. The session continued with discussions and opportunities and prospects for Kashmir produced in Mongolia during the times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's take a look at other news that happened this week.
Mental health support to both This specialized and detailed study focused on 4 interlinked areas: social services, employment and income, government response measures, and vulnerability. The assessment found that the COVID-19 pandemic is widening socioeconomic, educational, and gender inequalities while affecting equality in terms of human rights and livelihoods in Mongolia's urban and rural communities. The assessment also provided findings on the various effects of the crisis and coping strategies, with a particular focus on gendered socioeconomic impacts, such as women's disproportionate burdens of unpaid care work, domestic violence, access to essential social services, and insight on the impacts of the state of all-out readiness and strict lockdown measures. Women make up nearly 82% of all healthcare workers in Mongolia, which is much higher than the global average of around 70%. Women in Mongolia's healthcare sector are exposing themselves and their dependents to a significant risk of infection. Furthermore, women and girls bear an unequal share of unpaid care and the domestic work burden, which have increased significantly during COVID-19, negatively impacting their education, self-care, and development.
In Mongolia, women do 2.6 times more unpaid domestic care work than do men in Mongolia, so it's quite a heavy burden. Furthermore, domestic and gender-based violence we are seeing continue to increase during this situation. According to the National Statistics Office of Mongolia, domestic violence offenses have increased by 35% from the period in March to December 2020 compared with the same period in 2019. Women also remain significantly underrepresented in all aspects of decision-making in Mongolia, as well as around the world. Only 17% of Mongolia's parliament members are women, which is well below the international average.
During the lockdown period, women with disabilities and pregnant women in particular have experienced challenges in getting urgent medical care, and the maternal mortality rate increased 27.8% compared to the past 3 years.
To support the Mongolian government in overcoming socioeconomic difficulties during this COVID-19 crisis, we are also supporting the implementation of health and social welfare programs. Further, through our budget support, we have set targets to ensure that female employees benefit from the social protection and job retention programs that the government has rolled out. The packages have also supported micro and small and medium enterprises where women make up a significant number of employees. Statistics show that women comprise nearly 60% of family and sole entrepreneur-owned businesses. Accelerating progress in gender equality is one of 7 operational priorities of ADB's Strategy 2030. Under our forthcoming country partnership strategy for Mongolia, gender remains to be a thematic priority, cutting across 3 strategic pillars of our country partnership strategy covering 2021 to 2024.
According to the results of the study, the government of Mongolia should consider further gender-responsive policy options to ensure human rights in public service delivery, improve prevention and the early identification of gender-based and domestic violence, continue the current social protection measures, strengthen the digital capacity and skills of women, foster women's entrepreneurship and engagement in decent work, and increase women's participation in the decision-making process related to COVID-19 response and recovery. UNDP Deputy Resident Representative Nashida Sattar said, "We need a gender-sensitive, long-term strategy to mitigate the impacts. If not, it's very probable that the huge gains Mongolia has made over the years on gender equality will be lost, and it would be difficult to catch up." The second part of the virtual launch of the study results included a panel discussion. Panelists from the National Human Rights Commission, National Coordinator of MonFemNet Network, Men Healthy Family Center NGO, and the Independent Research Institute of Mongolia answered questions and discussed issues regarding COVID-19's impacts on women and girls in Mongolia.
Now let's see what's happening in the sports industry over the last week. Tashkent Grand Slam was held last week and ended on 7th of March. This was the best performance from the Mongolian national team over the last year. Mongolian national team came in second place with 2 gold, 2 silver and 1 bronze medal. The 2013 world champion from Mongolia, Munhwa Toruntsitsik, triumphed on day 1 and she beat 2018 Masters champion Tsunoda Natsumi from Japan in the finals, winning gold medal. She took home her first IGF World Tour gold medal since 2018. Sassurbaram, who competed in the women's under 52 kg, claimed a silver medal, while Basho became a silver medalist in the men's under 66 kg event. On the second day of the competition, the Mongolian national anthem was played for the second time in the skies of Tashkent. Tohtwater was the best wrestler in the men's 73 kg category, and he won a gold medal against Kazakhstan's athlete. On the last day of the competition, Gonchik Surung won a bronze medal in the under 100 kg weight category. However, the speculations that world champions Sumya, Said Molay and Hitlin will win medals did not come true. Chairman of the Physical Education and Sports Committee and Otgonbayar, president of the Mongolian National Olympic Committee, got the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine to encourage athletes on Wednesday. A total of 270 athletes and coaches from 15 Olympic teams and 7 Paralympic teams athletes are expected to be vaccinated. On the first day, according to the schedule, about 150 athletes and coaches, officials from the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, and the Mongolian National Olympic Committee were vaccinated. As for the national team athletes, they have been separated at the International Children's Narendra Center and continue their training. The Ministry of Education, Culture and Science organized the vaccination of athletes in accordance with the established rules of infection control, in accordance with the established procedures, in one stream at the Central Sports Palace. The World Archery Federation has announced the names of the top 14 judges for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Mongolian referee Inhuat Sarot became the first in the history of the sport in Mongolia to be a referee at the Olympic Games. Otgirth of Mongolia will judge the weightlifting competition of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Two of them became the first women in the history of Mongolian archery and weightlifting to be appointed as judges at the Olympic Games. Well, that's all for this week. The weather over the next week will be colder than this week, so stay healthy and we'll see you next time with more news. Goodbye and have a nice weekend.